The city never sleeps, but it certainly forgets. Emma, wrapped in layers of worn-out fabric, had long since blended into the background. Just another face in the crowd, another story left untold. That night, she wasn't thinking about herself. She wasn't thinking at all. Instinct took over the moment she saw the blinding headlights hurtling toward an unsuspecting man. Without a second thought, she lunged forward, her body colliding with his, shoving him just in time.
Hello, I'm the storyteller of the channel, and I would like to ask for a second of your time to subscribe, activate the notification bell, and like the video so that YouTube can take our story to more people who are passionate about stories like this. Thank you, and without further ado, let's continue with our story.
The screech of tires, the sharp sting of pavement against her skin, it all happened in an instant. A second too late, and he wouldn't have made it. Daniel Carter was a man who had everything: wealth, influence, a life carefully curated for success. He had built an empire, made decisions that moved markets. Yet for the first time in his life, he felt utterly powerless. One moment he was crossing the street, lost in thought, and the next he was staring into the face of a woman who had just saved his life at the cost of her own pain. His heart pounded. She was hurt. Before he could even gather himself, offer his gratitude, or help her up, she was gone, slipping into the shadows as if she had never existed. He should have forgotten about her. After all, what was she to him? Just a stranger, a fleeting moment of humanity in a world too fast to notice. But Daniel couldn't shake the image from his mind. The fearless way she had acted, the silent suffering etched into her features. He had spent years analyzing people, understanding motivations, predicting outcomes, yet he had no explanation for why she would risk her life for someone she didn't even know, and why she disappeared without waiting for a thank you. Sleep evaded him that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the scene replaying. The way she pushed him, the way she hit the ground, the way she vanished. There was a certain irony to it all. A man who had everything saved by someone who had nothing. It should have been the other way around. But fate, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. And Daniel? He wasn't the kind of man to let things go unanswered. The city was vast, its streets endless, but Daniel was determined. He had resources, connections, a reach far beyond what most could imagine. Finding her should have been easy. Yet, as days passed, as he combed through the very streets where their paths had crossed, she remained nothing more than a ghost. People barely noticed her existence. She had become part of the city's unseen, one of the many forgotten souls lost in the chaos of survival. And then, just when he thought she had truly disappeared forever, he saw her, curled up in the corner of an alley, her body folded in on itself against the cold. The dim glow of a flickering streetlight barely illuminated her frail frame, her few possessions tucked neatly beside her as if they were all she had left. His breath hitched. There she was, the woman who had saved his life. But when he stepped closer, when he said her name, she didn't look at him with gratitude. No relief, no recognition of fate's twist. Just a wall of resistance, built brick by brick, warning him to stay away. He had found her, but somehow, it felt like she was slipping away again. Daniel had spent his life solving problems with strategy, power, and precision. When he wanted something, he got it. When an obstacle stood in his way, he found a way around it. But finding Emma? That was proving to be a challenge unlike any other. The city was a labyrinth, filled with faces that blurred together, and she had mastered the art of disappearing. He walked the same streets every night, retracing his steps, searching alleyways, questioning vendors, asking the unseen about the invisible. No one seemed to know her. No one had even noticed her. It was as if she had never existed at all. The frustration gnawed at him, but it was more than that. It wasn't just about gratitude anymore. It wasn't about paying back a debt. It was about her, about the fact that someone so brave, so selfless, was struggling just to survive. He couldn't let that sit. He couldn't walk away. Hiring a private investigator was his next move, but even that led to dead ends. She didn't use shelters. She had no ID on record, no paper trail, no digital footprint. Emma wasn't just homeless. She was a ghost, slipping through the cracks of a system that had long since failed her. Just as he was about to lose hope, fate intervened. It was late, the air sharp with winter's bite, and Daniel had almost given up for the night when he spotted her. The same girl who had haunted his thoughts, curled up in the shadows of an alleyway, her body barely shielded from the cold. His pulse quickened. He had imagined this moment for days, planned out what he would say, how he would approach her. But nothing could have prepared him for the way she looked at him, like a cornered animal, ready to run at the first sign of danger. Emma. Her name felt strange on his tongue, like he wasn't sure he had the right to say it. She didn't answer. Her eyes flickered with recognition, but there was no relief, no gratitude, only wariness. He took a slow step forward, hands raised, a silent reassurance that he meant no harm. "I just want to talk," he said, his voice gentler than he was used to. She flinched at the words. People like him never just wanted to talk. She sat up, pulling her thin coat tighter around herself. "I don't need your help." The words were firm, but there was something else beneath them, something defensive, something tired. She had heard offers before, empty words coated in false kindness. People who wanted to ease their conscience with spare change and fleeting sympathy. She didn't expect anything different from him. Daniel wasn't easily discouraged, but he knew when to push and when to back off. He knelt beside her, ignoring the dirt, the dampness, the stares of passers-by who saw but did not stop. "You saved my life," he said simply. "I just want to return the favor." Her laugh was hollow, laced with something almost bitter. "You think a favor can fix this?" She gestured around her, at the harsh reality she lived in. "Go home, Daniel." He could have left. He could have walked away. But something told him that if he did, he would never find her again. And he wasn't ready to lose her just yet. Emma had spent years learning how to survive in a world that had long since turned its back on her. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, and kindness often came with a price. Daniel didn't understand that. Not yet. He came from a world where problems had solutions, where money could fix anything. But Emma's life wasn't a simple equation. It was a series of broken pieces that didn't fit together anymore. He wanted to help, but what he didn't realize was that help had never done her any favors. Every time she had trusted someone, she had ended up with less than she started. She hadn't always lived this way. There was a time when she had a home, a future, a family. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. A series of bad turns, one after another, had pushed her into a corner she couldn't escape from. First, she lost her mother, the only person who had ever made her feel safe. Then came the financial struggles, the impossible choices, the desperate decisions. And when the weight of it all became too much, she fell. The world wasn't kind to those who stumbled. It didn't offer a hand. It kicked you while you were down. Daniel had seen hardship before, but not like this. Not the kind that steals the light from your eyes, that turns people into ghosts of who they used to be. He was beginning to understand why she had run that night, why she had refused his help. She wasn't just wary of him. She was protecting herself from hope. Hope was dangerous. It made you believe in things that weren't real. And for someone like Emma, hope had always been followed by disappointment. But danger had a way of finding people who had nothing left to lose. That night, as she walked alone, a shadow emerged from the darkness, a man with a voice she knew too well. The lone shark. He had found her again. His words were smooth, almost friendly, but his eyes were cold. She owed him, and in his world, debts weren't forgiven. She had run out of chances. Emma's heart pounded. She could take the beating she had before. But this time, she wasn't alone. Before she could react, Daniel stepped between them. His presence was a stark contrast to the filth of the alley. His tailored coat, an unwavering gaze, a silent warning. "How much?" he asked, his voice calm, controlled. The man smirked, naming a price Emma could never pay. Without hesitation, Daniel pulled out his wallet and settled the debt in full. It was done. The threat was gone. But instead of relief, Emma felt something else, rage. She spun to face him, eyes burning with anger. "You had no right." The words came out sharp, cutting through the air. Daniel frowned. "I was just trying to... You were trying to fix me," she snapped. "I don't need to be fixed." Her voice broke at the last word, And for a moment, there was silence. She had spent so long fighting for control over her own life, even when she had nothing. And now, in one moment, he had taken that choice away. She turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing there with the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had thought he was doing the right thing, but maybe, just maybe, he still didn't understand what she truly needed. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to walk away from something unfinished. And Emma? She was unfinished. A story interrupted, a life left hanging in the balance. He couldn't fix her past, but maybe, just maybe, he could help her rewrite her future. But money wasn't the answer. Charity wasn't the solution. If he handed her everything, she would reject it. So instead, he gave her something different, an opportunity. "Work for me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Not as a favor, not as a handout, a real job. She laughed at first, a dry, humorless sound. "And why would you want someone like me in your company?" It was a fair question. His world wasn't kind to outsiders. People like Emma weren't supposed to walk through the doors of skyscrapers, sit at desks, or make decisions that mattered. But Daniel saw what others didn't. He saw the sharpness in her eyes, the resilience in her every move. "Because you're smart," he said simply. "Because you've survived things most people wouldn't." She hesitated. For the first time in a long time, someone wasn't looking at her with pity. He wasn't offering to save her. He was offering her a choice. And that terrified her more than anything. Walking into that office felt like stepping into another world. The pristine floors, the silent hum of computers, the people in crisp suits who barely spared her a glance. Emma kept her head down, ignoring the whispers, the judgment etched into their expressions. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to prove, to herself more than anyone, that she belonged. But belonging wasn't easy. The first few weeks were brutal. She made mistakes. She struggled with things that seemed second nature to everyone else. Every night, she fought the urge to walk away. But she didn't, because Emma didn't quit. She had spent years fighting for scraps, for warmth, for one more day. And if she could survive that, she could survive this. Slowly, she learned. She watched. She adapted. The same instincts that had kept her alive on the streets now helped her navigate boardrooms and spreadsheets. People underestimated her. That was their mistake. Because when they weren't looking, she worked harder, thought faster, pushed further. And little by little, the whispers changed. Respect wasn't given, it was earned. And Emma earned it. Not because Daniel vouched for her, not because of sympathy or special treatment, but because she refused to be anything less than exceptional. One day, a senior executive made a passing remark. Something dismissive, something careless. Emma could have let it slide. Instead, she fixed him with a steady gaze and calmly dismantled his entire argument in 3 sentences. The room went silent. And in that moment, everything shifted. Daniel watched it happen. The way the people around her stopped seeing a charity case and started seeing a force to be reckoned with. But Emma wasn't doing this for them. She wasn't even doing it for him. She was doing it for herself. And that was the moment Daniel knew. She didn't just deserve a second chance. She was going to take it and make it something no one could take away from her. Emma never imagined stability would feel this strange. For so long, survival had been her only goal. One more night, one more meal, one more chance to make it through. Now, she woke up in a bed that was hers, went to a job where people respected her, and lived a life that no longer felt like borrowed time. The transition wasn't easy. She still caught herself flinching at sudden noises, still double-checked every locked door, still carried the weight of years spent expecting the worst. But something was different now. She wasn't just surviving. She was living. And that realization hit her harder than she expected. Daniel saw the change in her, even before she did. There was a lightness to her steps, a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. But there were still moments when the past whispered in her ear, reminding her that happiness was fragile. He knew better than to push. Instead, he let her find her own way, standing close enough to catch her if she fell, but far enough to let her walk on her own. That was the thing about Emma. She didn't need saving. She just needed someone to believe she was worth more than the world had given her. Months passed, and Emma found herself in places she never expected. Meetings where her voice mattered, projects where her ideas shaped decisions, conversations where people listened not out of obligation, but because they valued what she had to say. It was intoxicating, this feeling of being seen, of being more than just a ghost drifting through life. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged. And yet, a small part of her still hesitated, afraid to trust in something that could be taken away. But trust, like anything else, had to be built. And with every passing day, Emma allowed herself to believe just a little bit more. She stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped expecting kindness to come with a price, stopped questioning whether she deserved a future that looked nothing like her past. It was a slow process, one step at a time, but she was moving forward, and that was enough. One evening, as she walked through the city that had once swallowed her whole, she passed by an alley she used to sleep in. The sight of it made her pause. How many people had walked past her back then? How many had seen, but never truly looked? She had been invisible once, and now she had a place in the world. The thought made her chest tighten, not with pain, but with something close to hope. Daniel found her standing there, lost in thought. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her, letting the silence speak for itself. When he finally did break it, his voice was quiet. "You're not that person anymore." She turned to him, eyes searching his, and for the first time, she truly believed it. She had fought for this. She had earned this. And no matter what the future held, one thing was certain. She wasn't going back.